Hello, Edmonton. So, since we're in construction season, the warmest season of Edmonton, I thought I'd start with an analogy about bridges. And the fact is, bridges, we model them, we analyze them, we look at traffic patterns on them, we predict whether a bridge will fail or work. We look at tensile strength, we look at their things, many different things, but ultimately, if we look at many different sciences and we compare that to the health sciences, we're still stuck in about 1916. And so here's actually an Ottawa, Ontario chart pulled, and if I would challenge you, I'd say that's not much different than what your family doctor probably does, even if it's in electronic format. And when I think about it, I think, wow, paper, even in an electronic system, is pretty good, isn't it? Because it naturally fits inside a vault. You know, it's a pretty good invention. You print a piece of paper, you put a form there, and you have to put it somewhere, and it's probably a steel filing cabinet. But the reality is, we're kind of evolved since then, and if we take an MRI of our brain, the mind map that we do probably doesn't fit so nicely in that steel vault. So if you have 24 providers who have to look at that pretty intense neural network, the fact is that it's probably being shoved into a library system of some sort on the web. And this web of knowledge doesn't fit the Dewey Decimal System very well. And with the population growth around the world, I'm pretty sure that we want something more tangible. And so the fact is that I, as Adam, going through this healthcare system, I go to Jasper, I run into some ski problems. I go to the G8 Summit and I get some problems with a guard. I come back to Edmonton and I get a flu one day. And so, you know, I get a few encounters with the healthcare system, but the reality is that the healthcare system isn't set up to monitor my encounters. I go all over the place. And the fact is we're just starting to see analytics come into the scene. And what we're noticing is that a place like the U of A hospital has a tremendous amount of burden placed on it in this community, struggling to meet these indicators, but also doing a good job. And what it means from a personal perspective is that kids are now being described for the first time from start to end in terms of a business process. That kid is being broken down into hundreds of encounters with our healthcare system. And so is that kid. But the difference in this case is that kid actually has two encounters automatically, right? The mother and the kid. And then we're expanding to the healthcare team. We're also looking at the healthcare provider. We're looking at the physician outcomes. We're looking at the nurse-related outcomes. And the fact is we have an explosion of data. And where does it go? Does it go into the paper systems or does it go into these transistors and microprocessors? And I think we know the answer to that. The fact is that our data is now being challenged to be reinvented. And as an analytics person, I don't think people realize who the data is for. And when it goes into this server, what are we designing it for? Are we designing it for your encounter next time you go skiing at Jasper? Or are we designing it for, you know, your encounter next time you go to Toronto and go to, you know, different parts? And, or are we designing it to surveil the system? Are we designing it so that we can keep track of an ever-increasing population with increasing complexity, such as aging and chronic diseases? And are we designing it for a culture of surveillance? And my answer is actually that we're designing it with the camera in mind. If we look at the impetus behind it, we see that all of Alberta's teaching hospitals are pretty expensive per weighted case. And this is publicly accessible information. It's, I think I counted it as 5 clicks away if you wanted to pull up this graph. Now we know that Alberta is a pretty expensive place for you to get hospital care. And we know that there's people in concrete towers, because we're in Edmonton, who actually are sitting at that top part of the clinical science building, and they're trying to solve that. They're trying to solve these system issues, and they're not trying to solve the problem facing the little kid or the problem facing the mother and the child at birth. They're trying to solve more complex issues to the system. And systems research is something that is not only fascinating, but is hitting our system, and it's turning into kind of an insurance policy in many respects. We're focusing on changing a system so that demand is lowered because our supply is finite, and we're using it as users of the system to make sure we're feeding our administrators information at economic forums about the state of home care, the state of our nursing homes, the state of our hospitals. And if you don't think about it too quickly, you begin to realize that your data, while completely private and confidential, is coming back to the cost per weighted case. The fact is that Alberta is the most successful out of all the provinces and territories in Canada at reducing the cost per weighted case in Canada. Again, I think this one's 6 clicks away, but you can pull it up using Tableau technologies on Kai-Hi website. And the fact is that's going to the boardroom. The very people who are developing the system aren't patients or doctors. It's the management of our systems. So we have an information system that serves a system, and that's going to lead to dramatic improvements in our healthcare system. It's going to lead to a change in how we think about health. This computer is not going to be reporting on your health, it's going to be reporting on the population's health. And your health will increasingly be put in the perspective of what society thinks you look like in terms of health. If you meet certain attributes when you come into the system, we will work to meet those needs that we think you have based on your population you fit in. And just as a final note, if you want to check your hospital before you go to it, it can work for you. And I want to sell this. It's not just about society. Type in Google, go to Canada Hospital Performance. The first click, I think you can click any of those, and you can check the performance of any healthcare facility in Canada before you go to it.